Ali Urman's with us, analyst at Ark Invest. Ali, thanks for being with us. Let's start with some of the differences that you see for investors between what we always call traditional healthcare and now the companies that we're calling disruptive healthcare. Explain the difference and why we should care.
Sure. That's a great question, Nicole, and thanks for having me. So one of the things that I'd like to kind of put as a highlight for that is vaccines. So disruptive innovation is really the key here. So those are the companies that investors should really look at. So innovation is really changing how vaccines are produced across the board. So prior to this, the fastest that we've ever had a vaccine approved was in 1967 for the mumps vaccine, and that took about 4 years. So we can clearly see the advantages and technological disruption that has happened in moving this forward so quickly in this current pandemic. Starting from being able to sequence the vaccine much quicker than previously, it was just a few days this time versus months for the first SARS epidemic. We're seeing tremendous differences in the traditional vaccines as opposed to the disruptive ones. So traditional approaches would use like a killed virus or a live attenuated vaccine, or which is essentially a weakened form of what causes the disease. Companies that are doing this approach include Novavax, GSK, Sanofi. Another approach, which is somewhat similar to the traditional, is creating a synthetic vaccine, which is essentially a foreign vaccine in the body. They've never seen it before because it's synthetic. Those approaches are similar to that of J&J and AstraZeneca, which is, we know, both on hold for safety reasons, although they recently came off hold. And then there are those really new innovative vaccines like mRNA or DNA vaccines, which use genetic material and offer a more differentiated approach. So we believe these approaches have been quicker to get into the clinic, as we've seen with companies like Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech, but also that they could be best in class, like a company called Arcturus Therapeutics, which is one of the holdings in our ARKG fund, because it could be a next generation mRNA single low dose vaccine, and it would help with expanded access, manufacturing, and scalability.
That's amazing. So there's really the different kinds. There's what we always know to be the dead virus. There's the synthetic, something you've made up to battle it, and using genetics. I mean, that basically is what I got from that. To elaborate, the Ark Genomic Revolution ETF, the ticker symbol's ARKG, covers some of this, right? Do you recommend this highly, and why?
So I recommend this because I think that we are focused on the really disruptive, interesting technologies. So some examples that I would highlight there are, a company called Iovance. So what they do is they harness the power of your own immune system to create a cancer therapy that is specifically engineered for you. They've shown data in melanoma, lung cancer, head and neck cancers. And what they do is it's called tumor infiltrating lymphocyte. And they've shown that it works for solid tumors. And solid tumors are just really difficult to treat. I was actually doing clinical research before this at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. One of the people that I always followed really closely, used to call him the godfather of immunotherapy, was Dr. Steven Rosenberg. And he actually works at the National Cancer Institute. And Iovance licenses their therapy directly from NCI and Dr. Rosenberg's lab, which I find amazing. Other things that I just would highlight from, our fund and from a disruptive, really interesting perspective, we also focus on things like gene editing and gene therapy. So a company that's really interesting is CRISPR Therapeutics. They're a gene editing company, and they're trying to cure chronic conditions with one-dose therapies like blood disorders or sickle cell anemia. And really interestingly, their founder and co-founder, just won the Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry a month ago for this discovery of CRISPR-Cas9 with her partner, Dr. Jennifer Doudna, and Emmanuel Charpentier.
Yeah, I know. Right. CRISPR you had on there, Invitae is on there, Pacific Bio, Twist Bio. Before I get to the names that we know more, any final thoughts on these disruptive names?
Sure. We just think that these are the names that are really going to harness and take us into sort of the next generation of cell and gene therapy. So moving forward from things like liquid tumors into solid tumors, moving things from in ex vivo approaches, which means doing the genetic altering outside of the body, into in vivo approaches, so actually doing it in the body, and moving from autologous therapies, which mean using your own cells, to allogeneic therapies, which mean using donor-derived cells. All of these things will help with creating better manufacturing, being able to scale better, and creating expanded access to patients.
We heard from Pfizer and Lilly on their quarterly reports. You talk about how they rushed through the mumps vaccine in the late 60s, and it took years. And we're trying to get a COVID vaccine as fast as we possibly can, just in this year alone. What are your final thoughts on some of these bigger drug makers that we know so well? Are you a fan?
Sure. We are a fan of the bigger drug makers, Novartis, Regeneron, BMS, Takeda, all sort of in our ARKG fund. And what we think about is we don't focus on the fact that they have such large pipelines. We focus on the fact that they have really big resources and they're able to execute really well. And so if they're able to do so, they're able to create really, really great innovation. So Takeda is a great example. They have a partnership with MD Anderson for an NK program, which is allogeneic. And we think that that's very innovative, forward thinking. And so I would say that just because they're larger companies does not mean that they are not very heavily involved in disruptive innovation.
Ali, thank you so much. Great to see you. I had no idea you had actually done the research working there in the lab as well. Ali Urman, thank you, analyst at Ark Invest. Thanks.